Welcome. Today we're diving into how to describe API roles and permissions in OpenAPI when you're not using OAuth2 flows. This video will show you the best practices for defining roles, linking documentation, and customizing the presentation in Redocly. Let's get started. According to the OpenAPI spec, for security schemes that aren't OAuth2, you can still include roles or permissions. This allows you to define role names for API execution without relying on in-band exchange mechanisms. Here's a quick example showing how these roles are listed in OpenAPI and how Redocly renders them on the right side. Next, we'll create a detailed permissions page. To do this, start a markdown file. Here, I'm using permissions.md and describe each role or permission relevant to your API. This page will help users understand the permission structure and find role descriptions easily. Now, we'll link this permissions page from within our security scheme description. This makes it easy for users to click over to the permissions page from any relevant section, keeping the context clear and accessible. In Redocly's viewer, roles appear under the label required scopes. Since our company uses permissions instead, we'll update this label by customizing the language Redocly uses. To do this, we'll add an entry to our translations.yaml file to change required scopes to required permissions. This keeps language consistent for our users, especially when scopes has a different meaning elsewhere. Now, for a bonus feature, what if we want to make sure the roles listed in our OpenAPI spec match a predefined list? We can set up a linting rule in the redocly.yaml file to check for this. Here's how. We add a rule that requires at least one role in each description and validates that all roles match our predefined list. This rule ensures that only recognized roles can be added, helping maintain consistency across the API documentation. Let's test it out. I'll add a role that doesn't exist in our predefined list. And as you can see, the linting feedback immediately warns us. This prevents unauthorized role names from making it into published documentation, keeping our API permissions reliable. Finally, let's test the end-user experience. In the timeline API, the permissions display looks great. Users can easily find and understand their required permissions, and the link to our permissions page is clear and accessible. And that's a wrap. You've seen how to describe roles and permissions in OpenAPI, customize display terms, and use Redocly's linting to ensure consistency. For more tutorials on optimizing OpenAPIs, visit us at redocly.com. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest in API best practices.